This is the IBJ podcast for the week of July 7th, 2025, brought to you by Taft. I'm your host, Mason King. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Independent bookstores seemingly have been an endangered species for about as long as independent newspapers have been on the list. But as one American author might put it, reports of their impending demise have been greatly exaggerated. For many, the recipe for success is local ownership, strict attention to local needs and concerns, and calendars packed with special events to help create a sense of community. This is what Tiffany Phillips has found over 9 years as founder and owner of Wild Geese Bookshop in Franklin, Indiana, on the far southern outskirts of the Indianapolis metropolitan area. Phillips had a well-established career as an attorney in the healthcare industry as she was turning 40, but Franklin didn't have a bookstore. One thing led to another as Phillips sought a new office space, and soon she was doing double duty as a lawyer and a bookshop proprietor. She had a bigger vision for the store as a hub for cultural life and a haven for anyone interested in creativity. As Wild Geese approaches its first decade in business, it has developed a national reputation on the authors circuit as a destination where Phillips and her staff pull out all the stops to host hundreds of fans and involve other local businesses like the historic Artcraft Theatre and the Main Madison Market Café. IBJ's Taylor Wooten recently wrote about this in the May 30th issue of the paper. For the IBJ podcast this week, I wanted to chat with Phillips about the small business challenges of opening and then growing the shop, and how she fights against persistent fears that investing in the printed word in a small Indiana city is kind of crazy. Here's our conversation. It's my pleasure to welcome to the podcast Tiffany Phillips, owner of Wild Geese Bookshop. Oh, I'm sorry. I've already forgot. Is it a bookshop?
Yeah, you're right.
I got it. Okay, good.
You got it.
Enough fact checking. All right. 3, 2. It's my pleasure to welcome to the podcast Tiffany Phillips, owner of Wild Geese Bookshop in Franklin, Indiana. Thank you so much for making time to talk today.
Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled.
As they say, let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Owensboro, Kentucky, which is on the Kentucky-Indiana border on the Ohio River in western Kentucky.
Okay. Oh, so pretty close. Okay. Is that close to Evansville?
Yeah, it's about an hour away.
Got it. Okay. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that those of us who love books started fairly early with a library, like a library that the parents took them to, or the library in school. When you were a kid, where was the place where you would go find books?
Our wonderful public library in Owensboro, and we could ride our bicycles there. And that was like the treat. Especially if there was a storm and you couldn't go to the pool in the summer, we would ride bikes to the library. And, Susan Orlean has written about how the library is the first place where you can kind of independently roam as a kid. You can walk around in the children's section and you have a little more autonomy and you can choose things and check them out and have a card with your name on it. And there's just something really empowering about that when you're a kid and you can explore your curiosities. But that was my favorite. And I would go home and pretend to check books out, pretend to stamp, pretend to, put cards in. So yeah, I was that kid for sure.
Did you, I think I've seen my friends do this when I was little. Did you like pretend to start your own library? Like you would like tell your friends, you can check out some of the books.
Oh yeah. And that has never stopped. I find that my home library now doesn't have my favorites in it because I tend to say, oh, you have to read this. I don't need it back. Just, you have to read this. I've become that person. Yeah. I don't have a lot of, things that I bring to the table. I'm not an excellent cook or whatever, but if you come to my house, you're going to go home with a book. It's just kind of how it goes. But yeah, I definitely did that. And I would lend out my books as a kid too and trade. And, the book fair was the thing.
Mm-hmm. I was more into the binding contract. Like,
oh, wow.
Yeah. Got a card. And you need to return this.
I like that.
Weeks.
Good for you. I love that.
Um,
It's probably wiser.
Well, yeah, it's just a sign that I ended up really litigious as an adult. Um, I'm going to go further on a limb and say that as a youngster or young adult, you develop a relationship with a favorite bookstore.
Oh, yeah. You know, and honestly, there was a Walden Books in Owensboro, that was in the mall, that I loved. But also, it really, I think, took off for me when I went to college. I went to the College of Charleston in South Carolina, which was like 700 miles from home. And at the time, they had a chapter two books that I loved. Um, and then when I went to law school in Macon, Georgia, I would always look for independent bookstores. And then when we moved back to Lexington, Kentucky, I spent a lot of time at the Morris Bookshop, which is also no longer open, and Joseph Beth. And every time I moved far away, I found that at home feeling in bookstores.
Mm.
And it was always a place you could explore curiosity. And anytime I traveled for work, I was always looking for the indie bookstore to go and just you just feel at home there, and you're around people who are curious about people and are curious about the world. And so it's just a great place to go and feel less alone and wonderful. And we didn't have one when we moved here.
Mm.
So
When you moved
I just think I noticed that void. And my children grew up, walking around train tables at Joseph Beth in Lexington, um, and the chalk table that was at Morris Bookshop. And we moved here and they were, I guess, I want to say 4, and 11, and just didn't there was not one here. And there was a grief in that. I was grieving moving from a place I really my husband took a job at Brigham College, and I was grieving, leaving behind Kentucky, which had always had a warm place in my heart, and trying something new. And um, it's always hard to imagine yourself in a space. You know what everything looks like in the landscape where you're living, and then you move to a new place, and it's hard. And I definitely felt that void that first year that I was here.
mm. When did you move to Franklin?
So it's been 10 years now.
Okay.
And the bookstore is about to be 9 in November.
Okay.
So I made it about a year, treading water until we had this opportunity. So it's been good.
Let me just back up for a second. So
Mhm.
you went to college in Charleston,
Mhm.
and you went to law school as well in Charleston?
I went to law school at Mercer in Macon, Georgia,
Got it. Okay.
and my husband at the time was at Emory. My boyfriend then, but became my husband. And so yeah, we were in Georgia, and we thought we would be in Georgia for a while, but then he got into a doctoral program at the University of Kentucky. So we found ourselves moving back to Kentucky and lived there for quite some time.
And then with your law degree, what did you do with that?
So my first year, I did a judicial clerkship, which was great because I had not gone to law school in Kentucky, and it's kind of hard to know the lay of the land without any contact. So that was a really great experience, and it was one of the most fundamental experiences in my professional life because you get to watch court proceedings from, capital murder to the domestic space and see what really tears people up, what's really hard about being a person. And I just learned a lot about being a lawyer too, watching the professionalism of different lawyers and thinking that's who I'd want to be like. This person's really professional in the way that they respect one another. You notice which lawyers shake hands with other lawyers before they speak. You just notice this stuff. It was really great. And I was with Rebecca Overstreet. She was the first female circuit judge in Fayette County, Kentucky. So I did a judicial clerkship, and then I worked for a private firm that was insurance defense in Lexington. And then after about 7 years, I opened up an office for Quinteros Prieto Wooden Boyer, which is a firm out of Miami. And they had seen a swell in their business in healthcare cases. And I was representing a lot of healthcare providers. And so it was a good fit. And then my client who I worked with the most hired me to go in-house and manage their litigation portfolio. So I did that and was doing that still when I moved here to Franklin. But that they sold their US operations. So I was definitely already in a wind down of that position. but I had built so many relationships with those people. I really wanted to see it through. I wanted to make sure that I felt very responsible for the people I represented and wanted to make sure that we wrapped everything up. So, as that wound down, I was already thinking about what's next. And I was doing that work from home, and it was very isolating because we had moved to this new place. And I was in my basement working on wrongful death.
Yeah.
So it's just not, it was like, I need something different. So that's how it started. I wanted to rent a space outside of the house to do the work.
Let me go back just a smidge again. So the way that I think that we had described this in the story that we recently did on Wild Geese was you generally focused on medical malpractice and wrongful deaths. Is that accurate?
Yes. I mean, it was medical malpractice. A lot of the claims involved, they were civil suits, and a lot of them did involve end of life care, wrongful death allegations.
If there isn't a book series about an attorney focused on medical malpractice and wrongful deaths, there should be.
Oh, gosh.
Or I'll take it from you. I mean, would that be as they say, a rich vein of
It might be. I mean, the it is so complex, and it is so easy for people to read a headline and make decisions about a good guy and a bad guy. And so, those cases have taught me that things are not always what they seem. And that there's, the first case I ever dealt with that I had to visit a long-term care facility. You may end up cutting this, Mason, because it's a tale.
Are you
I'm
good?
Southerner, so I'll
That's
start
fine.
telling tales.
Yeah.
But, the first facility I had to go in and do interviews, I was walking down a hallway with a nurse, and, a resident grabbed her hard and, kinda pulled at her, and she very gently, like, redirected him and calmed him down, and then continued to go into a conference room with me, and we talked, and I kept asking her if she was okay, and she was like, "Yeah," and, her arm, I noticed, was red, like, the whole time we talked, and it was such a common occurrence to her, it just didn't phase her, and, um, I represented a lot of people who provide care, and I listened to a lot of families too, and, that there's obviously frustrations and cases that are legitimate, but there's just always more to a story, so I definitely felt that it was my job, to listen to the stories and to be an advocate for everybody involved and to try to figure out, like, how do we do better, how to so there was always yeah, it would be an interesting book to read because people are interesting and their stories are interesting, so
Yeah, the wheels are turning in my head already. I'm
you
thinking,
should write it.
wait a second, that might be, the next great detective series. Were you ever interested in writing?
Oh, definitely. I'm a closet writer. I just yes, I studied oh gosh, this is so vulnerable. But I studied with Brett Lott in college, and his book got picked up by Oprah. His book, Jewel, got picked up by Oprah, and so he had kind of experienced that flash fame, but he was very grounded and centered, and he teaches it at, the college, and I really at one point, I went to him and said, I think maybe I don't wanna go to law school, I think I wanna be a writer," and he was like, You need to be a writer." Or he said, "You need to go to law school." He was like, "You need to go to law school." And,
Oh, no.
yeah, and I was like, "Okay." So I took that as like that's what I should do, and I did, and I'd always wanted to go to law school, so that was fine. I ran into him years later, and I told him that story, and he was like, "Well, Tiffany, I didn't mean you shouldn't write. I meant that all of us have to work another job." He was like, "Look at me, I work another job." He was like and I said, "Well, he had written about Mother Emanuel, the shooting that happened in Charleston, and he'd written about it in Vanity Fair, and I just thought it was such a beautiful essay. They call it the Holy City, there's all these churches in Charleston, and I'd written them about it, and I said it was so beautiful, and I said, "I love to read you writing, and thank you for teaching me to write. I still enjoy writing, but, I have young children now, so" as Admiral Lindbergh says, it's like rowing against wind and tide to write if you have children, small children. And he wrote me back, and all it said was all caps, "Don't you dare stop rowing." I was like, "Oh, wow, I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna print that out. I'm gonna keep it." So I haven't stopped rowing, but it's mostly for me. Like, I am like I love writers. I love books. I really don't love negative reviews. I never give them. I feel like if you don't like a book, go to another one. Somebody took the time to make that. And Liz Gilbert says, make your own art, if you don't like somebody else's art. So I really appreciate the courage it takes to write, but I'm a big chicken and I just keep it to myself.
Okay. Okay, let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsor. This is the IBJ Podcast.
Taft, today's modern law firm. With more than 800 attorneys in 8 primary Midwest markets and the District of Columbia, we provide solutions to the business issues facing middle market and emerging companies alike. We do this through a highly collaborative and inclusive team approach. Taft, the modern law firm. To learn more, visit taftlaw.com.
All right, we're back with this week's edition of the IBJ Podcast and my conversation with Tiffany Phillips about transitioning from a career in law to running a bookstore in a small Indiana city. So you're in Franklin.
Yes.
You're feeling isolated. You're
Yes.
working in your basement.
Yes.
And the work that you were doing is winding down. So how did the idea of opening a bookstore come about?
There was this cute space on Water Street that was small and it looks like an English bookshop. There's a building in Franklin that has different facades all around. Like each doorway has a different facade, and friends call it's like Epcot. It looks like Epcot because there's like a different facade. And this one little facade for this 500 square foot space looked like an English bookshop. It even had like a little swinging sign. And I thought, well, I'm gonna look and see what that would cost to rent just to put my office there. My paralegal's in Milwaukee. She doesn't need, space. And it would just be a little space for me. And I looked and it was like, well, this is kind of too big for just my desk, but it's too small for much of anything else. And I think I mentioned this in an article, but I was talking, when my daughter was with me at the time, she's 11. And I said, well, how is this zoned? Like, is it mixed use? Like, could you put retail in part of it? And they're like, oh, yeah, it's fine. You could do that in the front. And so I started thinking about it and I said to my daughter, I said, well, I wonder, if I could open a bookshop in the front since we don't have one here. And it always kind of been in the back of my mind. And I had been doing Julia Cameron's morning pages, which is you just write for the first 10 minutes, you're awake.
Oh, right.
I'd done that for like a year to try to figure out like, what do I want to do next with my life? And these kinds of themes kept bubbling up. And so every day my daughter would say, have you signed that lease? Did you sign the lease? Did you sign the lease? She was really pushing me to do it. She's like, I think you should do it. You should open a bookstore. And I wanted her to not be afraid to try things that she might fail, just because I would rather her see me do it and fail than not try out of fear. So that really gave me the courage because I thought, well, she's watching. I'm very risk averse in general. So, anyway, I did not tell my family. I talked to my husband about it, but I didn't tell anybody until it was already like we were planning a ribbon cutting. I really kept it a secret because it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense, Mesa. It doesn't make any sense. Like, why would you open a bookstore in 2016? And I just decided I was going to do it. And I signed the lease in July. And everybody said, you have to be open in the 4th. And I had to Google, what is the 4th? Like the 4th be with you. Like, what are they talking about? And it was the 4th quarter. You're like, oh, you need that's how incompetent I am. So I didn't know what that meant. I had to Google petty cash. I was like, what does that mean? I don't know what petty cash. I've got to have petty cash in the drawer. Like the learning curve was steep. I did take a class that was offered from the American Bookseller Association through this Paz Institute that was online. I took the online version only because I was too cheap to go. But that's about it. Anyway, it was a crazy idea, and I did it.
So you were renting the space. Were you still planning on using part of it for your office, or did it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I continued to do that work for a couple of years, and I hired people, to work the front. And I called it the reverse business mullet because it was a party in the front and a business in the back. But because of the nature of my work, I didn't have clients visiting. It's not like I'm not popping over an emotion hour, so it's fun. But Yeah, so I did that for several years, and a lot of it too, I was still doing from my basement, like, there's certain calls and things, but, like a lot of working parents, like, I was also negotiating cases in Carline at Custer Baker Intermediate School, like, you're on your phone, you're on your computer. I mean, that's kind of the double-edged sword of flexibility is that you're never not doing work of some sort.
So from the point at which you signed the lease to the point at which you opened, how much time was that?
July to November.
Oh, so that's a fast turnaround.
Yeah.
Did
But
you
it was
get out and look at other bookstores? Did you
well, I'd kinda had sunk cost in that already because I was such a, like, I don't golf, like, there's a lot of things I don't have hobbies like other people. Like, books are my hobby, like, I love books, I love bookstores. Everywhere we've ever gone on a trip, I'm always looking for where's the closest bookstore, and I'm indiscriminate, new, used, whoever, I'll go. Um, and anytime, like, I'm probably the only person who shipped books back from a honeymoon, like, sick. So, as far as, like, doing the recon work, I'd already kinda done that throughout, the first 40 years of my life. I opened right around the time I was 40. And I was thinking too, like, if not now, when? Like, it's hard to start over and try a totally different thing at any point in your life, but I kept thinking, I'm really gonna regret not starting this now if this is something that is really important to me.
Mhm. So how much of an investment did you need to make to get the doors open?
I mean, truthfully, about $20,000, um, just to open.
Mm.
Um, and it would have been a lot more, but I had such a small square footage footprint. I didn't own my own building. I could do my own legal work as far as like, articles of incorporation or paper, all the documentation.
Mm.
I was no stranger to reading forms and writing contracts and, that kind of thing. So, um, I don't think and also this was, 8 years ago. So I don't think that's comparable now. I think it would probably be a lot more now and the price of everything has gone up.
Yeah.
So, but that was just to get enough like inventory and displays on the floor and rent and start getting packaging, branding and, that kind of thing together.
Is there like a starter pack you can get if you're opening a bookstore?
Yeah.
You just get like a smattering of everything.
Yeah.
Is that actually available?
Yeah. So you call, gosh, what is her name? I can think of it if you give me a minute. There's a woman who works for Ingram. Ingram is like a wholesaler for books. I think her name is Martha. Anyway, and she sends you a Rosie file, which is an Excel spreadsheet, and it has all of the things that she would recommend based on your demographic, based on your square footage, and then you start tweaking. And like it was important to me, like I don't carry diet books. I don't carry like I don't want anybody to come into my store and feel like they need to be something different. I want people to feel like I'm enough and I can enjoy myself and I'm not gonna be shamed here. Um, so like there were a lot of things that I was like, nope, don't need that, and part of the joy of an independently owned business is the curation, whether it's a restaurant or a retail store. So it was important to me to curate, but also you have to think about like it can't just be that I think it's cool. Otherwise, you end up in a high fidelity record situation. I don't know if you ever read that book or saw the movie High Fidelity,
Mhm.
but the record store, when people come in and ask for certain things, they're just kind of rude to them about what they've asked for. Like, oh, are they in a coma? Okay, that kind of thing. And so I don't want to I never wanted to be like, well, I like this, so everybody should like it. So it's this balance of thinking about like, how can I curate and know that this is good for my store, but also that people are going to enjoy it. So one of the things we did do before we opened, we handed out bookmarks. My sister came in town and helped me, and we handed out bookmarks at the fall festival. We had a little stand at the fall festival, and I asked people to fill out cards. They were like library cards of their favorite book. And so then I had a shelf when we opened that were customer favorites that I curated from what people told me at the fall festival. And it helped me get a glimpse into what people were reading and what people enjoyed, but also help people see themselves there. And feel like, oh, this is really my bookstore. But when I opened every week, I would have to explain to people, well, no, that you don't check the books out here. You actually, these are for purchase, because the town just hadn't had an indie bookstore before. They had a faith-based store for a time. And there's a wonderful toy store here, and they sell books, but they hadn't had a traditional, indie bookstore before. So it was a learning curve for everybody.
So, I mean, their experience of going to find books as a library,
Yeah.
that was what they thought.
Yeah, and our library does an incredible job. We have a really great system here.
Wow, that's amazing. Um, were you concerned that the town was too small to support a bookstore?
Yes. And, it's nothing, it doesn't ever go away, that fear. Um, and we do focus on tourism too, as much as we focus on supporting the people here, because I think all small town downtowns could benefit from, people come in, spend the day, eat food, go to the movie, experience the town, so um it's important to us. I think it's never not far from my mind. And I never want people to feel like they're being guilted into buying from me, or like, oh, well, you should shop indie, like you should eat your vegetables or whatever. I want us to be providing a service that feels meaningful and hopefully helps their day. And, so we do carry a lot of gift items, but very rare would the gifts be over like the $50 price point.
Yeah, and you spoke to this a second ago. I just want to return to it quick. There had to have been a time where you had to sit down with yourself, or you and your husband had to sit down together and go, "This is nuts." People people read books on tablets and on their phones now. They get books on tape. They listen to them in their cars. Nobody wants to buy a physical book. So how did you answer that question?
Well, I mean, that's a two-parter, because the first part is like, I ask myself at least once a week, like, am I crazy for doing this? Like, this is crazy. So that does happen. I will say, yes, they do read on tablets, and we do now. Do have e-reader downloads available through bookshop.org. That is new. So that's exciting. And people are interested in audiobooks, and we offer those through Libra FM. So I feel like it's good to offer, as much as we're all addicted to their phones. And I'm the worst. Like, don't get me wrong, because social media is a full-time job for this business. But um, there is such a relief that you feel by just plugging it in on the charger in another room and going into a room with your book, because now our work, our family obligations, the news, our sense of our civic duties, everything is in the phone all the time. So I do think, as much as people like their e-readers, then I understand that for a million reasons. I do think there is a movement towards, I need to have some time that I'm not online. I mean, some people it's great, and I don't want to dog it, because I know for accessibility reasons, being able to enlarge fonts is easy. I know for moms who are doing late night feeding, sometimes it's the way that they can read and not have bright lights. So no harm there. But I think for a real deep sink read, it's just nice to have the paper. I like the smell of books. And now it's really interesting. We're seeing people read a book on their device or listen to it on audio, and then they want the paper version as their book trophy. And especially if it's like a beautiful edition, which that's kind of a new thing. The publishers have figured out that we like pretty things in our homes. And so that's a new thing. And we try to provide a lot of author event experiences so people can get their books signed or sometimes personalized. And
Beyond being a place where people buy books, what did you want the bookstore to be? At that point, did you have a conception of it as being anything other than a retail storefront?
I love that question, because it has changed. I think I wanted a place that felt like my Cheers, like bookstores always felt like they know your name, they know your kids, they know, and I didn't have that. And so I thought, well, I'm going to make it for myself, because I don't have that here. People in Indiana are so wonderful. They are also very respectful of your privacy in a way that I'm not used to in the South. In the South, you're at the grocery store and people just have conversations with you. you are family like that. You're just talking. And here, if you strike up a conversation at the grocery store with somebody you don't know, they might pause or hesitate. They're just not after an introduction, no problem. But people are very respectful of people's physical space, or at least that seems to be my experience. And I just felt so isolated. And I just wanted a place where people could come in and feel like a warm welcome and that they're already home and they're already known. That's how it started. And then and I still try to cultivate that, and I only hire people who have been regulars because I want them to get it. They need to know what we're trying to do. They need to have felt it. They need to have been a participant and gotten. They also need to want that too. It's not for everybody. Some people are like, I want a quiet space. Don't talk to me, so we do chat to people. Um, but I opened up November, it was like the first week of November 2016, which was also a very contentious political election year. And it was a very contentious week. And it became a space, though, where people would be together in the same room who would not interact online. And that became really motivating to me because I would interact with people and just fall in love with them. They were just the most wonderful people. And then they would post something online that I was like, whoa. And it helped me so much to be able to think like there's more to that person.
Mhm.
And I think that's been so good for me. I just wish everybody could have that gift. It's a gift because it's really easy to try to compartmentalize people into boxes, and people are nuanced and complicated. And I don't love those generalized comments of the them or the they, like this group over here and that group over there, because I have found that most of the different interactions that people have, they actually have a lot in common as well. And it gets lost, when you're not together in real life. So it's become a place that's given me proximity to people in a way that I hope it helps other people too. It's definitely helped me.
Mhm. When they told you that you needed to be open by fourth quarter, was that because of the holiday shopping season?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was just good practical advice. And downtown Franklin does a nice job with holiday open house and really promoting shop local during the holidays. But I knew so little, Mason. I just didn't know that like that's a make or break week for you. I didn't know.
Yeah.
And now I know. But we also I just try to look at the whole calendar year though, with intention about like, why is this season slow? Why is this day slow? How can we not be slow? What do people need? During the pandemic, I sold things that were cute for your desk because I knew people were having home office setups and I wanted people to feel joy while sitting there on their Zooms and doing their work and helping their kids with school. So the nice thing about being a small business is you can pivot very quickly. So I'm always thinking about how are people living their lives? What do they need? What's bringing them joy? What um, brings people together? How are people gathering?
So how did you end up in the current building, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, it's basically a two-story house with maybe a half attic
It is.
on a residential street?
Yeah, I know. Another bad idea, Mason. Like, what was I thinking?
I will tell you, my wife and I came to visit the store last month,
Oh,
and, so we parked on Jefferson, and then, we turn on the main, and, like, there's the Artcraft, there's the Willard, I'm like, "Okay, it's right around the corner." And they're like, "Okay, where's the bookstore?" This is a residential street.
I am a
We
pro.
had to get about halfway down the block and turn around. I'm like, "Oh, no, it's right there."
There it is. I am a pro at opening businesses that people can't find, I guess, because the first space was really hard to find too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And there's not great parking. You kind of got to park. I mean, there is, but it's not like a parking lot right beside the building. You do have to like park. There's usually on Water Street. But yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I went to a meeting that the city was having for like creative thinkers about development. And I mentioned I really want a house and I want a porch because there's a lot that's been written about porches too. About how like we all have kind of gravitated towards our backyards. People aren't talking to one another as much. People, Ben Sass has written about like having bowling leagues is something that we used to have. We used to bring people together. We don't, so I was really interested in that. And I wanted to have a porch. I wanted to have a place where people could meet a friend. I don't have any interest in running a restaurant or coffee business or anything like that. We've got good ones here. So I'm like, get coffee from those places and come hang out, come read. Um, and Patchett has talked about, you need a place to go after brunch with your friends. What are you going to do? Go walk around, a store, like, walk around. You need to go to a bookstore. Come on. And so I was thinking about that. So at this meeting, I mentioned I'm looking for a house with a porch if you know of anybody who has something. And Ronnie Oliver, who was working for the city at the time, said, what about Franklin Heritage? Somebody donated them this house. Franklin Heritage, and I don't know if I should get into the layout of how all that works, but
I assume that's a not-for-profit that supports the historicity of Franklin.
Yeah, it really kicked off after the 2008 flood. People saved what they could in their homes. What got destroyed, if there were like windows and things that could be used, they put them in this building called Madison Street Salvage, which is now like a thrift place, and you can get windows and light fixtures and wonderful things. And then the proceeds of that go to the theater, the Artcraft, and then people donate things. So they restore buildings. So they had been donated this house. It was a hotel in 1911.
Oh, wow.
It has been like a bed and breakfast kind of breakdown. I mean, it was a hotel, but it was a series of rooms. It had been a private residence for a while, and it had fallen into disrepair, and they were going to renovate it. And so I just kept talking to them about, if you ever renovate it and you want a tenant, please consider me. And then I was just, annoyingly persistent about it. Just, hey, remember me? Yeah, still interested. My lease comes up, because my lease was a 5-year lease. And I had talked to my current, the biggest push to get me out of that other building was there was no way to make it wheelchair accessible. Like, I bought a ramp. It was too steep. The turnaround was too tight. It wasn't ADA compliant. And that was the biggest thing. So they were able to build a ramp on our new space. And that was key. All it takes is one customer who has to sit outside while their family comes in to browse for you to want to move mountains to fix it, So it had always been a priority, but that day just broke my heart. I thought, I've got to fix this, So that was a big, huge motivator. I did like where I was. I liked the little bookshop, still a little nostalgic for it. Amalia and Lawrence were great. But it was time.
Did that give you more space?
Yeah, it tripled our space. But I was too scared when I started off to do much. I thought, well, if this thing sinks at 500 square feet, it's a little more manageable to swallow that inventory loss or figure it out, than it is for a bigger space. I need to see, to your earlier question, can this town support it? But Franklin's a really cool place, and I just love the people here because they don't complain about, oh, we don't have this, we don't have that. They just figure out like, hey, we should do something about this. Let's do it. They're just very like, it's an eccentric town. It's very quirky, but it's not snobby. But they're not afraid to make things better. They're not afraid to like take constructive criticism and be like, okay, let's do this better. I just love that about the spirit of the town. And I really think it stems from this devastating flood they had in 2008. The people really came together and they just were committed to like, let's be the solution.
Yeah.
Which I really love.
Yeah, for folks who are listening from maybe outside of central Indiana, Franklin is in a way a destination. I mean, it is.
You.
It is
I
immediately,
think so.
yeah. It's pretty close to Indianapolis, immediately south of what we consider to be metropolitan Indianapolis. It's kind of the definition of a cute town. They've done a wonderful job preserving some of the original architecture in the residential areas and also in other parts of the town, the commercial parts of the town. They got a great, what you consider to be a main street. It's wonderful. And, it's a college town. Franklin College is right there. And so some of the things that people would expect from college towns, they could find in Franklin. So, I mean, if that helps anybody orient themselves to what kind of place it is. And we just don't want to call it like, oh, it's a small town in Indiana. It's small city, 20,000 people maybe.
Yeah, yeah, I
But
think so.
but there is a sophistication and there's a, a reverence for culture there that, you'd expect from a college town.
I think so, and I think, and I still find myself feeling like I'm still kind of an outsider. I've only been here 10 years, and it's sort of like in Charleston too. You can say like, "Oh, are you from here?" And somebody who's 98 will be like, "No, honey, I moved here when I was 2." Like they'll live there their whole lives, but they still don't claim they're there. I feel that way a little bit. Like I still feel like I don't want to make assumptions about the place. I'm still like learning it. But in the 10 years I've been here, I've been very impressed with the willingness of the town to be welcoming to people and evolve. I used to go to conferences for booksellers, and I still do, but I would go to New York and major cities and talk to publishers and say, "Look, we're 18 miles south of Indianapolis. We're 45 minutes from an international airport. We're an hour and a half north of Louisville. We're an hour and a half west of Cincinnati. We're 3 hours south of Chicago. If you're going on a tour in multi-cities, pop somebody in Franklin. We have the beautiful Artcraft Theatre, which seats 600. We, have people who will come out. You can have an event in New York City, but guess what? There's a whole lot of other things to choose from. But in Franklin, like there's stuff to choose from, but like we have readers and we have people who want an experience and they want to get out and do something and give us a chance." And it was uphill for several years. But I think now the word has gotten out, and we had Mike Rowe come, and we've had, lots of people who've been able to sell out the art craft. And so I think finally the word has gotten out, and it's not, people keep asking me like, "Well, how are you doing this? How are you getting authors to come?" And it's like, well, first of all, I've been working at it for 8 years, kind of like nonstop. I don't really sleep. And secondly, the town really met me halfway. I don't know if you remember where that movie that Chevy Chase was in, where I think it's called Funny Farm, where he's trying to sell his house.
Oh, yeah.
And the whole town, like, co-conspires with him to make it, like, super Hallmark cute whenever the realtors are there because they just want him to move. And so they all come out and they make it look super charming. It's almost like that. Like, we just have a town that really, like, puts its pearls on and says, "Hey, we're glad you're here."
So I'm guessing that one of the ways bookstores traditionally attract patrons is by hosting readings
Yeah.
and book signings by authors. And so you were trying to do that from the get-go.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Because yeah. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
yeah, what kind of authors were you getting toward the beginning?
Well, at the beginning, I tried to find people that were traditionally published that had a regional appeal. So I was I wanted to make sure that these are authors who people here would be excited about. And the library also does author events, and they do an incredible job.
Yeah.
Um, but I think I just wanted to start building those relationships with different publishers so that we could get the authors to come who we know our audience, really would appreciate. So that's kind of how it started. But I think I probably, if I knew now then, I probably wouldn't have cast my net so broadly or been so like gung ho about it. But I don't know. I mean, you just kind of see what works, and you can't. I didn't cast my nets though at everything in the world. I really tried to focus on like, yeah, but what would people here want to see? I want it to be something they're excited about. I want there to be things where writing students at the college or people in the community can go and be like, I met an author and I got my book signed, and now I'm thinking about this. Or I just know that experience can be so life-changing. So I wanted to bring that. And two, I wanted to bring more in-person, real-life experiences where people came together. So we were building that, and then COVID happened and everything stopped. And so we had to get really creative to stay afloat. And then we're kind of seeing the event space ramp up again.
Yeah. So I've seen, meet the author events done really poorly in other places, and where they tried out the card table and
It's so sad.
there's a sign that says meet the author, and then there's this lonely person sitting there with 5 books. Um, so what I've gathered from our reporting is that Wild Geese has developed a reputation, even national reputation, for booking popular and significant authors and then staging, um, I was about ready to say meaty, staging really sticky events that can accommodate as many as 600 people that incorporate other local businesses. How did you get to that model?
Whew. Um, that's a great question. It's fueled by anxiety because,
Isn't everything?
yeah, because I feel like you do. Like you go and you see somebody with a card table, and it's like throwing a birthday party for a child and nobody shows is so sad. And so I very much don't want to. There are some authors who are super famous, but I know, would not bring a crowd. And so I don't pitch them because I don't want to waste their time or the publisher's time. So but that's a dance of figuring out and listening to your customer, and in some ways advocating as an attorney. You don't get to pick what side you're on most of the time. That you do have to become a good listener. So listening to my customers and really hearing what they're interested in has helped what their book clubs are reading, what they're loving, what my booksellers are loving, and looking at the national trends. That helps us find people, and then we try to think about the spirit of the book and the author and pitch a proposal for an event that fits. It needs to be that you're hosting a party for this, not just, and I want it to be a good experience. And you got to think about the human beings who are going to come there. Are they going to be hungry? Are they, how can we keep them comfortable? How can we better organize the signing process? And we're constantly working on that. And I have an events coordinator, Lauren Collins, who's excellent, who brings an education background, and she's a teacher as well. And so, I try to find people who help me, who are smarter than me, and who use their skill sets to make sure that we're thinking about and anticipating everybody's needs as much as you can. And I'll say, Mason, I mean, I've failed at so many things. There's so many things but we try to make sure it's never wasted. If at any time we make a mistake I really try to learn from it and develop a new procedure, or, figure out how can we do this. I think that's it. And I will say, I think for anybody in event planning, paying attention to what are the talents in my community that we can weave into this event, because we have really delicious locally made pizzas that we can bring in. And we have this wonderful coffee shop that can stay open late. And, how can you look around you and use, first of all, shine a light on those businesses. And also they can help support a better event. I just think it's good for everybody. It's great business. It's great for the customer. And I love it. I mean, when we did the Frederick Bachman event, he is not cool to have attention, he's wonderful, but it really makes him anxious. And he's written a book called Anxious People. It makes him anxious to have all that attention on himself. And so at the beginning of our discussion, I said, I know that this is hard to have all 600 people looking at you, but if we could just turn our attention to the 600 people in the audience tonight and thank them, because all of them have single-handedly changed the economic landscape for our town today. Because you've eaten dinner, there's a lot of small businesses that can pay their bills a little easier this week because you've come to this event. So thank you for coming and being a conduit. He's the kind of author who doesn't have to tour anymore.
From a social media perspective, how valuable is having the marquee for the Artcraft Theatre, where you can show an author underneath a giant marquee with their name on it? And kind of just send the message to whoever's out there in the social media world that, this isn't small town Indiana book signing. Or what do you think a small town Indiana book signing is?
Yeah, it's so cool. And they get to sign the wall inside when they read there. That's something that they've started doing. And yeah, it feels really special. And I think it's something that it just would not exist. That theater would have been a parking lot, but for the people in this community. So I don't take any of it for granted. I don't know that I could have been in the position that I'm in at this juncture in any other place.
How many events do you host per year now?
I don't know, but I can look and email you. I don't kn
That's okay. It's more than one a month, I'm assuming.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, at least once a week, it feel like.
Mhm.
Um, but, like, for summer camp for grown-ups, we have, like, one every day, so for that week. But, yeah,
Mm.
it's a lot.
Yeah, tell us real quick what summer camp for grown-ups is.
We do it during the week of the county fair, because there's no business downtown usually during the fair week. It's because there's a lot going on out there. And so a lot of the programming is around um, just having author events each day of the week. And we have like a couple group blocks at the hotels. And the idea is that you could take some time for yourself and just enjoy these different authors. And we try to mix up the programming between like luncheons and evening events to, create something fun and memorable. So that this is our third year and it's been really good.
So how many employees do you currently have?
I need to get back to you. Let me think on that. We've got somebody, we just hired somebody else who's coming on, who's been with me part time,
Okay.
and is now coming on full time. So that's the thing is like we've had a mixture of people who've been full time and part time. I think we have 11 total, but that includes part time and like one person is just 4 hours a week. She comes in on Friday 'cause she's also a writer. Um, so, but I think we have maybe 5 full time. Um, and then, but of that 11, there's a few people who just come in and work with events. So, it's the biggest team we've ever had, so far. But I always, want to hire conservatively because I want to make sure, we are good and that they are, you know, safe and that they can take a risk on us too and all that. But um, my biggest goals though are to be able to continue to give uh, provide a place to work that's a good place to be where they feel supported and they have resources available to them. And I'm working on benefits and that's my goal. Like Martha Hoover has these restaurants and she's got everybody's on health insurance and I obsess about that. I just think that's the coolest. And so that's the goal is I want to be able to be a workspace where people have careers and we're developing in a lot of different directions with there's really three businesses. There's the in-store experience. There's an online shopping experience, and that includes subscription boxes. And then and there's the event space. And so the events that happen. So there's really three different things to focus on. And there's lots of communication that has to be done, lots of marketing that has to be done, lots of customer interactions and customer service and inventory ordering. And there's just a lot of moving parts now. I just want to make sure we're taking good care of people.
Gotcha. So the business overall, how's it doing? Are you healthy? Are you profitable?
We're healthy.
Okay. You're in the black. Great. So, uh, full speed ahead. No surprises.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. I mean, we're always trying to be creative. I am competitive. I want to be first at trying something new. And I really love creating things and trying things. And I don't know, I want to keep making sure though that everything that we're doing is still meaningful to our customer. I don't want to just do it for the sake of doing it.
And right before we started talking, you had a piece of advice for anybody who was interested in doing what you did. What is your advice having gone through this?
I work way more hours now than I did as a partner in a law firm or a junior associate in a law firm. And, it's just a lot more hours. I think my legal training and the hours and the workload and the pacing was excellent training for this, like to be successful at it. I do kind of sleep with one eye open. Like, I know I don't want to be discouraging, but like, there's just a lot that happens. Everything takes a lot of time, and the 24-hour news cycle is really fast right now. And even just little things like social media posts that you do for the business, you don't want to be tone deaf to what things are going on in the world and what your customers may be dealing with, or so there's a certain amount of emotional intelligence that you have to apply to all of your business decisions that you ultimately, like, if I make a mistake there, then it impacts the people working for me.
Well, I want to thank you for taking so much time to explain all this for me. This is really fascinating.
Oh, of course, of course. And, I don't know that anybody should listen to me for anything, but this is what my experience has been. And I hope, if nothing else, I hope that people, um, their takeaway would be, even if you've had a different career doing something else and you decide to change careers in your 40s, like I did, nothing's wasted. Everything that you've done before is helpful. And there's this sort of sunk cost fallacy that kind of gets in our way a lot of times and makes us feel like, well, I've worked so hard and I've built up to this point. I'm throwing it away if I do something else. And that has not been my experience. It's been a great comfort to me to know, okay, I can do hard things. I can try something new. Here's some skills I have that are helpful. And you just trust your gut a little bit more too. So I never, the Wild Geese poem is a lot about, like, you don't have to suffer. You can love what you love. And I do want people to feel like there's nothing wrong about changing your career. You know what the future is going to look like doing what you're doing now. What you've already had that experience, and it's okay to want to try to have a new adventure.
My thanks again to Tiffany Phillips. A quick reminder, you can read more about the way Wild Geese Bookshop has developed a strong presence on the national book tour circuit at IBJ.com. Just search for Wild Geese. And folks, before you get on with the rest of your week, there are several features in this week's edition of the IBJ I want to draw to your attention. First up, the population of Bargersville on the south side of the Indy metro area has more than tripled in 15 years. Daniel Bradley tracks the evolution of the largely rural community as it gets larger, richer, and younger, and tries to build the downtown. Also in this week's issue, Susan Orr follows the swelling pushback against data center projects across the state. And Dave Lindquist explains how WNBA All-Star and Indiana Black Expo organizers are teaming up to share the spotlight on the same weekend. And again, you can find these stories in the latest print edition of IBJ or online at IBJ.com. Now, it's quite a bit easier to access all the latest business news and all of IBJ's data on Central Indiana's business, community, and economy if you're a subscriber. We're running a promotion right now that gives you complete access for $1 per week for 3 months. Just to get a sense of how valuable and original our content is, just go to IBJ.com and click on the subscribe button. And thanks again for making time this week for the IBJ podcast. I'm Mason King. Hang in there, everybody. We'll be back again next week.